harvest mostly complete in the state, many farmers are probably thinking about planning for next year's crop. Cattle producers who took cows off pasture earlier than normal this season are probably wondering what shape grasses will be in at the beginning of next season. As drought continues, we talked with Al Dutcher Wednesday about his winter outlook and how set back Nebraska is after months of drought.
Well, I think we got to take this into two parts. First is what was the impacts of the drought of 2012. We look at the cropping year from October 2011 through into September. If you look at the total deficits accumulated across the state, in the Panhandle and the western Sandhills, we're running about 6 to 9 inch deficits. In across northeast Nebraska, 12 to 15 inch deficits. So in order for us to significantly cut into this drought, we're going to have to make up some of those deficits. About half of them should be applied to the very wet period before that, the other half to this dry period. So an estimate would be that we're going to need to be about 7.5 inches above normal for whatever period we define to make up those deficits in northeast, about 4.5 to 6 inches across western Nebraska. Northeast Nebraska, if we wanted to make up all those deficits by the time we get through the end of April next year, it's going to require somewhere around, best guess, 15 to 18 inches. Across the western part of the state, we're probably looking at about 12 to 14 inches, which represents about 150% of normal from now through the end of April to completely eliminate the drought.
That's a huge amount of ground to make up.
That's 150% of normal, and you find very few instances of that in historical records where we see that type of happen. Probably less than a 5% chance.
As dry as it's been so far this month even, are the weather patterns mirroring what we had last year?
No, I would argue that they're not. Yes, we are seeing the dry conditions, but we have to look at it in terms of temperature and precipitation. What we notice is that we got to the third week of August, we've seen a pretty significant cold front move through the upper plains region that kind of broke the heat, the extensive heat, brought our first significant precipitation to southeast Nebraska, missed much of the remainder of the state. But since then, we've been in a persistently cool pattern. And in fact, for the last 60 days, most of Nebraska is averaging 2 to 4 degrees below normal. Now, we have been warm recently, and there's no saying that we're not going to see periods of warmth, but if you look at the way the distribution pattern in the United States has been in terms of above normal and below normal, consistently the areas east of the Rocky Mountains have seen primarily below normal temperature for the last 60 to up to 90 days. Areas west of the Continental Divide have seen above normal temperatures, and I really don't see much variance of that. Yes, we may go through periods of warmth and cold, but overall the trend appears to be much cooler than normal. We're just not seeing the precipitation making it to the surface here in Nebraska, particularly in the hard-hit areas of the Sandhills, south central and southwest Nebraska.
Big question is, does that change? What's your outlook going forward as we move through winter, both in precipitation and temperature?
Well, the big thing that we're dealing with is that the El Nino event that we thought was going to occur doesn't appear it's going to form as anticipated. We may see periods where El Nino-like conditions have materialized for several weeks, but overall we're not expecting a solid El Nino signal. So the northern jet is going to become the big player this winter, as it has already done. We've seen big storms erupting both on the east coast and the upper plains. We've seen some pretty significant wind events, and we've seen some pretty significant cold air infiltrations, only to see it move rapidly above normal when we get a high pressure building law. So if this trend continues, we would expect to see rapid swings in temperatures. At some point, we would expect the jet to start slipping a little bit farther south.
Which means
that the big storms in the upper plains should start to move southward in response to the jet pushing southward. Usually reaches maximum southerly extent somewhere around the 3rd to 4th week of January before it starts making northern progress. So if these patterns continue, I would expect to see a couple of pretty significant storms, at least somewhere in the central plains. We have the chance for limited moisture. I don't think there's anything in the signal that shows that we're going to be extensively wet. So we probably will see a little semblance of winter, much colder than last winter, but in the same token, we're probably not going to see this drought completely eradicated by next spring. But again, we could have significant recovery in our agricultural drought and yet still carry a pretty steep hydrological drought. It's going to take a lot longer for that to be eliminated. And so water issues become very, very important for western Nebraska. But what I would tell producers is prepare as if we're going to enter a second year of drought, with the hope that Mother Nature will provide enough relief that we will not see the materializing conditions like we did this growing season push out into next growing season.